All right, good morning, folks. We're going to give everyone a few more minutes to get dialed in, and we'll get started at 2 after the hour.
I just realized I have not shouted at my household and told them all to be quiet, so this could be interesting.
That's perfect, though. That's how people will know that this is a real live webinar and not
There you
a
go.
pre-recorded thing. So bring that.
Keep meaning to get one of those, on air, like
yeah.
Nice.
Blinky lights.
All right, it's 2 after, so let's get started. First of all, I just wanted to say a quick thank you so much for joining us today. I know that for those of you on the West Coast, it's an early morning. For James, it's a late night. So I'm glad we could all be together here to talk about this. And I did just want to start with a couple of really quick housekeeping notes. First of all, we are recording this, so just keep that in mind. Your questions and all that kind of thing. We will record them, and we will send out a copy of the video from the webinar afterwards. So if you want to refer back to anything, it'll all be available for you. We do have live captioning, so if you'd like to take advantage of that, if you go into the Zoom UI, you can actually turn that on. That'll be available for you, and you can. It's possible to open it in another window as well if you'd prefer to do that. Yes, perfect. Bethany has posted instructions in the chat to be able to follow along with the live captioning. And of course, I did just want to say that we're all calling in from our homes around the world. So if anyone loses connectivity or anything like that, please just give us a couple minutes. Hopefully we'll be back right away. And finally, I did want to say, we're here doing this live so that we can hear your questions and hear from you. So we'll talk for a little bit at the beginning and tell you a little bit about this topic, and Joe will share some of his stories from the trenches with you. But then please, be generous with your questions. We really want to hear from you and understand which parts of this are interesting to you so that we can have an even better conversation. All right. With that, let's dive in. Today, we are talking about our 2021 Observability Maturity Community Research Report. So we will tell you a little bit about the report itself and then jump into the findings. First of all, to introduce our wonderful panelists here, we've got James Governor, who's a Redmonk Principal Analyst and Co-founder. And then, of course, we've got Charity Majors, who is Honeycomb CTO and Co-founder. And then we are very lucky to have Joe Thackery, who's a Senior Software Engineer at Eaze, who's going to tell us about how this has really worked for them in the trenches at Eaze. And then I'm Honeycomb's VP of Engineering, so I'll be moderating today. So to dive into the report, this just came out a few weeks ago. This is a report conducted by ClearPath Strategies. We had 405 respondents, and the sort of high level, what was the big picture? We found that observability adoption is on the rise. Mature teams see significant benefits from observability, which we'll dig into. And then we did find that barriers still exist for some less mature teams, which is why I'm so happy to have Joe here today. He can talk a little bit about what that journey has looked like for them. For folks who are less familiar with a maturity model, I did want to just talk quickly about what that is and what the value is. Charity, Honeycomb has been working on its own observability maturity model for a little while. I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about what that tool is and how you expect folks to use it.
What the tool is?
Like, yeah, what's a maturity model? Like
what yeah. So Liz and I started working on this a couple of years ago, and basically I think of it as like a choose your own adventure. Like, you should be able to look at yourself, you should be able to look at the model and see yourself reflected in it. Like, if you're weak in one area, like you should be able to recognize that and say, oh, these are some steps I can take to become, stronger in this area. And because it's not really a linear path. Everyone starts from a different and sort of unique place, but there are patterns, right? There are patterns. Some people, are really weak when it comes to deploying, but they're strong when it comes to automation. Some people are really weak when it comes to, the on-call stuff, but really strong in other areas. So I really just think of it like as a choose your own adventure sort of thing, where you should be able to spot and see your strengths and weaknesses reflected, as well as seeing sort of a map for how to get to the next level in the areas where you're weak.
I love that.
So can I jump in a little bit? Because
Please.
one of the things that I've really liked about the approach is kind of, we know it works. It's good to adopt things that work, I guess. And if we think about the impact that the Dora report has made in making a transition from why to how, over time, one will hope that the corpus of research will serve to do that, because we're still kind of in the why phase. Why should we do a thing? But over time, as you identify those key metrics or those key benefits, it becomes a how statement. And I think that's the sort of journey that customers need to go on. And so that's why I think certainly a regular repeated thing that is, we're currently in the why, but as we get to how, that's why a report like this can be really valuable in a market space. And so, that was why I was sort of excited to see that you
that's
started
why
doing
everybody we talk to is like, cool. Can you show me a story of someone just like me who has done this before? Or can you connect me with somebody who's just like me who has done this before? Because we're all looking to leverage each other's growth and what we found, which is good, because we can't each reinvent the wheel from scratch. That would be absolutely exhausting and time consuming and ridiculous. And so I think James is right. This is a way to sort of try to synthesize and derive patterns from, how everyone else is doing this and try to apply it to our own stacks.
I love that. It's sort of that perfect bridge between taking the theory and then figuring out how to it sort of gives you the template for putting it into practice. When we looked at what we saw from the report, we see that there's sort of this maturity distribution, and we do see more teams moving toward that advanced group. But as we look across the industry, there's still plenty of folks who are in that novice bucket. But when we look at folks who are moving to the right, we see that they're seeing all kinds of benefits. So higher productivity, improvement in code quality, higher end user satisfaction, and then even better retention of their software development teams. So folks who have these tools find that their teams are more satisfied at work, they run into less friction on the job, and it has these kind of positive benefits all around the organization.
Yeah, and part of what I think is interesting is that we also tried to pull people to understand what they meant by observability, because as you guys know, there are a million different definitions out there, and there's a definition that we subscribe to, which is all about the unknown unknowns, et cetera, which is not the definition about the 3 pillars and so forth. And the most interesting thing to me was that the distribution of benefits accrues to the people who define observability more or less the way we do. Not more or less, not in the sort of generic like telemetry way, which was really validating. And Joe, do you have something to say?
No, I was just going to agree. The unknown, having the tools in place to answer the unknown unknowns is really valuable for us. We have quite a variety of different patterns of traffic and patterns of services, and so we don't know everything about them at all times. So yeah, the unknown unknowns are really the valuable piece that observability helps answer.
For a long time, you know, a lot of people have just accused me of like, it was just a marketing thing. And I've been like, but it's not. There's real, like, it's kind of a step function in terms of actually being able to understand your systems. And I feel like that's what we're starting to see reflected in this maturity model, which is exciting.
Yeah. Logs are great, but if you didn't add the log statements into your code already in advance, knowing that something might go wrong there,
yeah,
you're out of luck when something does go wrong.
And metrics are great, but if you didn't capture the exact metric that you wanted, you're screwed because you can't, you know, slice and dice them like retroactively.
Jim, I'm curious to know if that end user satisfaction piece has been something that you've seen at Eaze. Like, how do you think about measuring that? And has that actually been something that has come out of your observability journey as well?
Yeah, we've had some wins definitely on the user satisfaction front because we're a consumer platform, and so we focus on, you know, add to carts and checkouts and kind of classic metrics around on the business end. And so we've been able to say, okay, when we improve this code path, we see, you know, more add to carts or more checkouts. And being able to do that is great for being able to justify investing more time into improving our observability and keeping that kind of like in a virtuous cycle feeding on itself.
Nice. Fantastic.
A lot of the point of this sort of a thing is to help give ammunition to our sort of champions who are out there, people who are on the ground who really want to be able to invest time in this or want to be able to buy a tool or whatever, but are having a hard time convincing their higher ups or having a hard time convincing their teams even. And so I hope that this helps arm people with the evidence that they need to start investing in this area.
Yeah, I feel like the benefits stand out really clearly in this report. I really love this set of metrics where you sort of see that these higher performing teams are going to be so much more likely to be able to immediately see the problem when something breaks, and then you know, get to the cause of it more quickly, and then be able to immediately identify the solution.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, when you look at that last graph, the gap between the advanced and intermediate
It's
teams
enormous.
and it's huge. And especially it's remarkable given that like the advanced and intermediate teams are more likely to have more automated, right? So,
Right.
you know, a lot of the teams on that novice end are remediating the same problems over and over, and it could still be a challenge.
Yeah.
One
Joe,
thing I found kind of interesting was just the commonality between, so that I mean, obviously they're related, but getting to know your systems, the answers were very close to being able to find problems and troubleshoot. The organizations that are seemingly spending time using observability tooling and approaches to get to know their systems, there is a correlation between troubleshooting. So it's not enough to just use the tool for troubleshooting. You also need to use the tool. Part of observability is getting to know what you're running.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the key changes that we're seeing here from a market maturity perspective.
Yeah, I mean, we've all had the experience, I think, of using tools that just frustrated our curiosity and did not encourage us to lean in and use them more. And the hope is that with observability tooling, that you get actually lean in because you get that dopamine hit, and you're like, you resolved the problem, you figured it out, you understood it better, and that makes it much more likely that you'll reach for it the next time, or that you'll spend more time understanding the problem because it's not as alienating.
Joe, I'd love to hear if how much of this resonates with the journey that your team has been on. Did you find that you were able to more quickly diagnose issues, or what are the kinds of benefits you saw?
Yeah, I mean, kind of along the lines of what James was saying, even in advance, we were able to say like, okay, this is not doing what I thought it was doing. And, you know, there's way more requests going on in this, you know, out of this initial customer kind of workflow or path through our website than we thought there should be. And that kind of gave us opportunities to say like, okay, this will be a problem on, you know, our heaviest traffic days of the year if we don't do something about it now.
That's super cool, because that's like you're moving a couple steps away from the, oh, I'm getting paged, oh, the site's down, oh, it's an emergency, and you're spending time just getting familiar with your systems, and you're comparing your expectation with the reality, and then investigating when they're different, and so you're actually warding off future problems before your customers even see them.
Yeah, and our systems are, I mean, we're created in a very different time in our industry, in a regulatory environment as well. And so understanding how they were created years ago and how they are operating now compared to the way we want to be operating in the physical world is, it gives us a lot of insight. And of course, when things do go wrong, it's great there to identify the trouble spots.
Nice.
And then we've also found one of the other sections of this report that really stood out was just that there are still teams, especially at that kind of novice end of the curve, that are still facing some barriers to adoption. So, you know, there's always trouble around figuring out how to prioritize this work. There are folks who think that their current tools are good enough. There are teams that are convinced, but they've just got other challenges that are in the way first. There are folks who are worried about costs. James, I'd love to hear from you. You know, when you think about people who are weighing this decision, what do you see out there in terms of how they're thinking about how to prioritize observability?
Yeah, I think really one of the things that we're seeing is I guess observability in pockets, which is I think as it should be. Certainly very hard to kind of retrofit everything for a different way of working. So what we're seeing is, I think, organizations. They're probably, you know, a lot of, well, certainly in the enterprise side, you know, maybe observability curious, you know, fairly early in the journey, but they will have some teams that are doing some, building some distributed systems. They are realizing that there are a set of challenges that they're kind of struggling with. And within those pockets, within those specific teams, we're seeing them want to get better. And I think that's where they're quickly realizing actually there is a bit of a skills gap. So I think that what we're seeing in terms of at least enterprise adoption, it's quite different on the SaaS side. People are quite a bit more mature on this spectrum. They're basically saying to themselves, yeah, we would like to have more confidence, and this is going to be part of, I think, what Honeycomb would call production excellence. You know, we're going to be better at automation. We're going to be better at testing. We're going to be doing all of these things. When we've done all of those things, observability should and must be part of the mix. One of the things that you know, for high performing teams, I think one of the things that I'm beginning to identify is if they're understanding the interlinkages of observability with the pipeline and their release management, that's where you realize that they're probably further along on the journey. But yeah, lack of skills is definitely an issue.
I like what Blake just said in his comment to us. I find the prioritization struggle kind of funny because how can we effectively prioritize without good observability? This is true. People are used to flying super blind. They're used to just like, wee, off into the abyss, right? Like, yeah.
Joe, I'd love to hear a little bit about what this journey looked like at Eaze and how people became convinced that this is something that they wanted to invest in. You started, you know, in the early days, the tool chain was just kind of metrics and logs, right? What convinced your team that they needed to take the leap?
Yeah, unfortunately, it was some painful outages, basically on high profile, our biggest days of the year, our biggest business days of the year. And so we realized we needed to rethink a lot of aspects of how we approached our systems. And one of them was getting better observability and to understand what's happening when a customer just opens up our menu, or when one of our operations staff is managing the orders coming in and the drivers delivering the orders. And so, yeah, it was kind of a come to Jesus moment where we had to do something. And fortunately, we had some good leadership in place that knew the value of observability and brought us to Honeycomb.
Was there a debate about, you know, was there sort of that 3 pillars versus like holistic observability debate at your company? Like, did people argue for adding an additional pillar, or was it fairly clear which way you wanted to go?
I think at first there was definitely some reluctance to take on the extra work, basically, of introducing the instrumentation into our systems. But I think once we saw some of the initial just kind of like proof of concept results, it started to say, okay, now I can I know I'm a visual person, so it helped me at least see what was going on under the hood, and compared to just a lot of text sliding down in logs or dashboards, which were great, but it's like, I know the system's broken. The dashboard is like just helping me figure out exactly what's already broken. And we kind of started moving from this inherently reactionary standpoint to much more proactive. And that was something that we had been talking about for a while, this kind of shift. And so it aligning with adding more observability tooling.
Love that. And your team had sort of a smart strategy for not diving straight into, having to instrument every single thing out of the box. What did your instrumentation journey look like?
Yeah, we were fortunate. We have a bunch of Node.js services. We have a few other languages and frameworks as well, but the Honeycomb Beeline package basically gives you a lot of information for free. Just install it, add your API keys, and you're getting some valuable information right out of the box. And so that was kind of like our proof of concept. We instrumented a few of our key systems and said, okay, we can start tracing our request all the way down. And people started to buy into it. And so we went through doing a decent amount of work to do some custom implementation, do some custom instrumentation in our core systems once we had proven that worth. But we were able to get, data to resolve issues and identify problem spots even without that.
Yeah, that's such a good approach. Start with what you can get for free and then add on in kind of an iterative way.
Mm-hmm.
James, I know you've been following along with the kind of the great 3 pillars debate out there. I'm curious to know, what you've seen in terms of are folks moving away from that model, or how do we conceptualize it?
That's a great question. I think the industry has work to do. You've been doing some very useful reframing. I think that there's an aspect of work that has to and had to be done, certainly by incumbents. We can't be in an environment where we're constantly context shifting. That makes life just a lot harder. And so whilst I understand observability is not 3 pillars, certainly without investing in bringing together data across those pillars, we're going to be struggling. So I think the investments being made across the industry, probably following your lead in some respects, are frankly welcome. These are problems that everyone's going to have, and the rest the industry is going to have to move forward. But I tend to sort of, from a definitional standpoint, I'm looking at changes in behavior to try and understand what observability means, and it kind of gets back to the earlier slide where I was saying, observing and understanding your system in order that you can do better troubleshooting with the knowledge that things will break, but if you apply a set of engineering disciplines, hopefully you will be able to identify and fix those breakages. I mean, everyone's sort of talked about shifting testing left, but in a world of shifting, sort of, frankly, we're also shifting testing right. We're shifting testing into production, and the orgs that sort of understand that's sort of definitional to me about the value and what we're doing with observability. So I think that I don't think the 3 pillars lacks value. I just think that for me, the definition is about problem solving and probably, frankly, maturity in general about how you're developing apps. I mentioned the DORA report. You're going to be thinking about those sorts of metrics. You're going to be understanding that these distributed systems are going to be non-deterministic, and that's the problem you're solving. So it's and it's certainly not, oh, this is great because I have distributed traces now mixed with some security logs from 3 weeks ago. Those are entirely different sets of problems, and I think it's about that sort of point in time. And yeah, it's about solving a specific set of problems rather than, oh, here is a bunch of data.
I like that framing. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Joe, one of the things I found most interesting about your journey is that you started with the production stuff, and then you actually moved to instrumenting your CI pipeline, I believe, like understanding your builds better. What made you decide that that was the next step for you?
Good question. I think it was when we did that, we were moving from, we were completely revamping our deploy and CI workflows. And so the idea was to get it in at the start. We knew the old deploys were slow and kind of a black box in some places. And so we wanted to have more answers and be able to say at least, okay, this is the slow part of our deploy for this service, and be able to compare them over time and track them over time. And we changed CI providers, and we're running on GitHub Actions now. And so we wanted to have a good understanding of this new system that we were using the new tools that we were writing for deploys. And we had already started using Honeycomb and saw the value of it. And yeah, it just made sense.
Got it. And Charity, I know you've sort of seen this kind of virtuous circle or sort of this interplay between CICD and observability. But what's the connection there? Do you need one for the other? Should you have observability all throughout the pipeline? Like, what advice would you give to people?
Yeah, well, I mean, that interval between when you write the code and when the code is live is so core and so central to having a high-performing team. And if you want to get that amount of time down and keep it down, you need observability. I kind of see them as like peanut butter and jelly. You can't really get one without the other. You can't really hope to have a high-performing pipeline that's just like shipping code, without, like, it's a heartbeat, right? Without the ability to like swiftly diagnose and figure out what's going wrong. And, conversely, you can't really get observability if you don't have the ability to ship code in a reasonable amount of time. Because if you've got like a 6-month lead time, what does it even matter if you can diagnose swiftly, because you can't ship changes within a 6-month timeline. So I think that they really go together, and it's hard to do one without the other.
There are definitely preferences here, though, because I've been talking about it as like peanut butter and chocolate. So, but that's just a preferential thing. But yeah, I just can't agree enough. I think that this is such a key. Well, my hobby horse is like progressive delivery, and if you want to be thinking about, like I say, understanding a system as it will perform in production across a set of cohorts or cohort that you define, then observability is just non-optional. I think to do modern release management, you have to have observability of pipeline and observability of your systems.
You're talking about shifting left and shifting right and all this stuff. And I think that's absolutely right, because you can shift left all you want, but until you're including production, you don't actually know what the fuck you're doing, right? Like you can shift all that stuff, as early on, but until you're including production in that cycle, in what you're doing, you don't know, right? And so I think that, just accepting it's going to break, absolutely. And we don't know until we know. This is why, like, the entire point of CICD, right? That book was written, 15 years ago? We were shipping shrink wrapped software. And that's why I think they included like the sort of cop out in CD is like, CD means you're ready to deploy whenever possible, but you don't actually know if what you have is going to work until you've tried it, right? Like that's what we've learned. And so I think that CD, continuous delivery, should be defined as actually deploying it and seeing if it works.
One of the things I love about that is that I think seeing instrumentation in the CI/CD pipeline can sometimes be one of those ways that people get observability without having to like dive straight into production. So, Joe's team did it production first and then instrument CI/CD, but I've seen teams do it the other way around. Joe, obviously your team is going to all be at different levels in terms of their observability journey. Can you think of anything else that has helped people on your team who are maybe a little bit slower to understanding the concepts or to seeing the value to get to that place where they also can have the same benefits?
Yeah, I mean, we evangelize internally from I sit on the platform and infrastructure team, and so we evangelize our observability outwards. We try to bake it in under the under the hood, basically, so that we give as much to the other teams that are building our applications and building our clients, and so that reduce that like initial burden on them, so they ideally can try to get something out of the box. We've built Honeycomb into our we have like an internal in-house framework, and so it's there. Does it give you the exact instrumentation for your service? Probably not, but it's at least going to give you some request level metrics, some request level information that you can trace through as it comes from our front ends and all the way through. So that was kind of our answer. We've fortunately had some very like, I guess, advanced on the maturity curve here, members of our team that were able to help lift up the rest of the teams. If you don't have those, I would say, I mean, there are tons of resources out there. The auto instrumentation is honestly just amazing. I can't sing its praises enough. It's simple to install. It's simple to get started. And even if you're only looking within one system or one service out of a set of distributed systems, you can still start to get that. Once you do it, it starts to click. I think for me, that's how it works.
I think you're answering a question that we had in the Q&A already, which is, for a really novice team working from scratch on observability, where do you think it's a good place to start? The answer you've just given, which is out of the box telemetry. That's a great place to start. If the tool is going to provide some context, then that's the first step on the journey, isn't it? Or certainly a good step on the journey. I don't know if it's the first step.
Yeah, installing the beeline, just seeing what you get out the box. Like I think we underplay, we under advertise just how magical it is, because there's so much more you also can do, but just installing it out of the box is a great first step. And after that, I feel like really good way to deploy it is just to follow the pain, right? Because as soon as you can start solving people's pain, I think a lot of people take the cautious strategy of like doing some small services around the edge and stuff. And that I think is usually a recipe to it getting deprioritized over and over. But when you can just like go aim straight at what is waking people up, what is causing our customers pain, and just knock off a couple of really big things really quickly, and just follow the pain from there, like that's my preferred approach.
As James mentioned, we've got some great questions coming into the Q&A, so I'm going to jump ahead to that section, and please do ask us more questions in the chat. We've got another great one, which is what resources would you suggest for a team that is building a greenfield system and wants to do the best job possible of building observability in from day one? This is a great one because it's kind of the opposite of the journey that Joe's team was on, where they had a legacy system and had to figure out how to start. Charity, what advice would you give to someone starting from day one?
I would say, use our free tier. Just install the beelines or install the open telemetry collectors. This is almost more a question of like practices than it is tools, I think, because like that's the right place to start with the tool, but encouraging your team to like keep one window open with their IDE and another window open with, the Honeycomb graphs, and look at it regularly. Making your CI/CD pipeline auto deploy on day one is the number one tip I would give anyone. It can be small, it can be janky, but if every time your team commits something, it automatically, merges. Well, every time your team merges something to main, if it builds deploys automatically with telemetry, and then you have a practice of expecting your engineers to go and look at it, right? It should be a really short interval. It should be like a minute or two, and just getting yourself into that habit. It's like, I reckon it, I compare it to, like, Alexander the Great and lifting his horse every day before breakfast, right? Started when he was a little boy and lifted it every day. And by the time he was a man, he could lift his horse every day, right? When you start early, it's easy. It's so much easier than when you have to, bolt it on afterwards.
Wow.
I love that horse analogy. I'm definitely going to say
that's crazy. I think one thing resource for a team is and it's one thing to jump in with tooling, but definitely some learning. I mean, there are some people that you should be following and paying attention to before you do anything. I think copy construct, Cindy Sridharan, I've just shared a link in the chat about her observability book. I think is a good read. I would be definitely watching some talks and paying attention to Yana Dogan. I would be going back and looking at a lot of the writing that Charity has done. I'd look at some of the stuff that Liz Fong Jones has done, because I think you want to start. I think the place to start for a team is to probably read stuff together. And to establish what it is you're doing and why you're doing it.
Have brown bag learnings over lunch where you all watch a talk together and discuss it. Yeah,
some just so you have a shared language and you're coming at it from with some shared ideas, so that when you actually proceed to start choosing tools, playing with tools in order to learn more, you've got sort of a grounding. So I think that in terms of the socio-technical system, learning together is possibly a really good way to, before building anything, let's think about what we're building and why and how. And I just always think that I mean, those are the people I always mention sort of initially as the folks who you should read if you want to understand these concepts a little bit better. And I mean, I think basically, I guess I mentioned 4 folks, all of whom have built and managed systems at high scale. If you're doing instrumentation and observability at Amazon, Google, Apple, frankly, the kind of work that Honeycomb is doing, you're going to know a little bit about this. So I think that's a great place to start. Is lunch and learn together before you build.
I love that. Yeah. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, just to jump on the getting the teams on board is such a huge part of it. The socio-technical aspect, as Charity likes to say. We were fortunate. We short-circuited all that just by having a number of high-profile within our company painful outages, and so we had been saying for a little while, hey, our system's getting creaky, it's getting old, it's built for a different era, and so we need to do something to deal with it. But we had competing initiatives, and I think that is reflected here. It's hard to justify doing something that doesn't obviously on its face deliver that business value, I guess. And so you sometimes you have to suffer through the pain first. But yeah, the way to do it through less painful means talk to people, watch the talks. I think the Honeycomb and Ollycon talks just came out on YouTube, so check them out. They were really cool.
I love it. Yeah, there's some great stuff in there, and I love when we don't have to plug it. So thanks, Joe, for doing that. Charity, you've helped a lot of people. You kind of helped drag a lot of people up that adoption curve to observability. Have you ever seen anyone really be a contrarian and really dig their feet in? And what how do you get around some of those objections?
Often it's the person who built the last generation of tools and they're an expert in it, and for good reason. I honestly don't feel like you can reasonably ask someone to adopt a different tool methodology, whatever, unless what you're offering them is an order of magnitude better than what they've got. Right. And for some systems, some teams, honestly, it isn't worth it. if you've got a monolith, if you've got a database, if you've got a app, if you've got a load balancer, then maybe it isn't worth it. But if you do have these problems, and what you have is like a couple of holdouts who are just like vehemently opposed to it because they know how to use the current system, then look for bridges, right? Look for bridges from the past to the future. Look for ways, like for me, like we were using Ganglia at Parse, and we wrote this yank ass, cron job once a minute to sync the XML/DB bar temp XML dump, once a minute from Scuba, from Ganglia into Scuba, and that helps me see like my world and theirs, right? I knew what the variables were named, I knew how to use it, etc. Like you don't want to take away someone's toys until you've given them something that's better. So like the more you can co-opt that person and ask them to be the person who prototypes this, ask them to like partner with you on like trying to find something better. Like you want to turn them in from your biggest detractor into your biggest evangelist if at all possible.
I love that. You can hear that you've been on both sides of that line, which I really appreciate. Here we've got another great question in the chat, which is, have you seen any data on how observability affects system uptime / availability? Do you know what SLAs organizations in this report have? Is it 3 nines? Is it 5 nines? Charity, I always direct all my nines questions to you. What do you think about that one?
Well, yeah, there's some data in the report about how this affects it. It's ironic though, because so often it appears that your availability is going down when in fact it's your ability to detect your errors that is going up. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag there. The more you can understand your systems, the better your availability will be. That's pretty intuitive and pretty.
No, Charity, did you not hear if we did less testing, then coronavirus would have gone away?
Right.
And it all would be fine.
There's a real thing that we've seen like over and over in the field where we start to roll out Honeycomb and people start finding bugs. And they're like, no, stop. We have to halt, right? There's a bug there. We need to fix it. And we're just like, okay. They fix the bugs. We roll it up. We're like, stop, halt, more bugs. We're just like, okay, kids, we're picking up the rock. And yes, there's a lot of bugs underneath it, but they've been there forever. You're just now finding them, right? So that's my answer is, it cannot but improve your availability, even though in the short term, it may seem to impact it negatively.
From my perspective, I just think one of the things to understand is like sort of in asking the question, what are we asking? Because nines are very, very expensive.
Right.
You're kind of 10xing your infrastructure investments potentially every time you get another 9.
Yep.
So you need to think about,
do we really need this?
do we really need this? I think my business partner, Stephen, just has my favorite story on this. Is sort of back in the day, he was at an SI and he went into an organization and they were like, yeah, we need 24/7, 365 for this service. And he said, what's the service? He said, oh, well, they said it's used by our customer service representatives to support our customers. And he's like, oh, are you doing 24/7 operations? And they're like, oh, no, our customer service people work from 9 to 6. And Steve was kind of like, well, wait, what? Do they work on the weekends? And they're like, no, we don't. And the point was just the amount that you're spending in order to do that is really profound. And I think hopefully he persuaded them it was a bad idea, or maybe being a good consultant, he just helped them do it anyway, even though it was a bad idea. I don't know. But, I think the bottom line there is that, look, I know that we live in a world of oh my goodness, wow, look, Google is not going to fall over, or, a lot of these services never going to fall over. But I think as an organization, we need to understand, and this gets to observability really, like, let's understand our customers' needs. Let's understand our capacities and abilities as an organization to accommodate those needs and kind of optimize for that. I'm a little bit like I think orgs that are doing a lot of observability investments and use of tooling have more 9s. I think will be interesting data, but I think if you're embarking on the observability journey, it shouldn't necessarily be with that, oh, then I'll get 2 extra 9s. I think you need to think about why you're making those investments.
Yeah, totally. Great answer.
Joe, how do you think about this at Eaze? Do you use SLOs or do you have particular target availability numbers?
We don't use SLOs yet as the Honeycomb feature in terms of that, but we have actually a very similar story to what James was just saying. We operate by legal restriction during certain hours. So we have a very well-defined set of hours where we know our systems need to be up and need to be responding in a reasonable amount of time to make our operations, like, because we have people on the ground doing physical activities in order to deliver our orders to our customers. And so we focus on those hours, and we take advantage as much as we can of the fact that we have off hours where we can make changes that might otherwise be disruptive, and then makes it easier to make those changes because we don't have to account for having the new system side by side with the old system. We can just do a swap over. So in terms of like nines, we don't have nines internally. We're still small and growing, so maybe that's coming in the future. But yeah, we view it as like these are the core hours we need to avoid problems for our customers during these hours. And we have our customers making orders, and we have our customers on the operations team. So we think about those as kind of they have two different sets of needs and two different, they have slightly different hours, they have slightly different tooling, they hit different paths. And so, yeah, I think observability helps on that front too. Slightly different topic, but helps us understand our different constituencies.
Yeah, I love that. You don't just have to pursue 3 nines for no reason. You can think about what you really need, what your customers are going to need to be happy.
Yeah.
Charity, I saw you just answered the question about
capacity
management, but I'd love to just talk a little bit more about that one. How do you
Sure.
think about how those tools work together?
Metrics are the right tool for the job for capacity management because it's oriented around the perspective of the service, right? How much utilization does the service have, versus observability, which is oriented around the perspective of the customer, the user. If you're an infrastructure team, if you're responsible for backend services, not for customer facing stuff, then your metrics, your monitoring tools, percent utilization, like that's the right tool for that job. It doesn't really have anything to do with observability.
So Charity, can you talk a bit there, having said that, if we think about capacity planning, and one of the reasons you do that is about cost, I know some orgs that have been able to get a better handle on their spend with.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So
that's a different way of looking at it, but yeah, absolutely. Like we use Honeycomb for managing our own spend. Emily should probably talk about that.
Oh gosh, that's a whole rabbit hole. We can deep dive into using a Honeycomb to look at your AWS bills, but
that's just kind of using it as a data tool. I mean, data is
right.
data. I mean, you can definitely use a data tool for that. But yeah, if it's an infrastructure team looking at infrastructure problems, I think you need metrics because they're cheap, they compress easily, they're the right perspective, etc. But if you are trying to understand your costs, then yeah, absolutely pipe it into Honeycomb or something like that.
Another question, what are some of the pitfalls you see when people start to adopt observability? How do you avoid the things on the journey that might slow you down or might become roadblocks for your team? Joe, is there any advice that you'd give to someone who's going through the same journey you went on, and what would help them out?
Yeah, pitfalls. Distributed systems are tough, and keeping them all on the same page and talking in the same tracing language or tracing headers and tracing formats can get complicated. So I'd say use out of the box tooling, use the libraries that come from Honeycomb or from the open source community as much as possible. It's not always possible. We had to roll our own, at least when we started implementing into some of our services. And for that, we have had occasional issues. So yeah, I would say try to rely on the community as much as possible and rely on the community tooling. OTel is growing faster and faster. We don't use it a lot internally yet, but the fact that there's an open community, or kind of a standard emerging, is something that I think I would like to look at in the future, or if I was starting greenfield to look at that.
James, what about you? Have you seen any common pitfalls on the journey out there?
Yeah, don't build your own. Don't build your own is the main one. I mean, I think that like Joe's point, there's some really cool like community created technologies out there. There's kind of a wealth of interesting technology that theoretically you could build, you know, a platform that was going to enable you to do observability. Chances are high you go the wrong path and do 3 pillars. But there's all this technology. There's a wealth of it out there. It's great. But then you're going to be left, you know, cleaning, feeding, and watering that system. Like to Charity's point, you're going to have one person on the team. That's the person that built the platform. If they're not there, then you've just bottlenecked on your ability to make change and make sure that stuff is working effectively. So I mean, it's interesting. I'm a big believer in open source, but I think that you need to have a really good reason to roll your own. And like thinking that you could just like grab some Prometheus and some Grafana or some Elk Stack or something and start to build your observability platform, you're going to end up bashing yourself on the thumb with that hammer.
Yeah, definitely have seen teams coming back from having taken that journey and realizing they want to take a new approach. The one distinction though is that there's a little bit of a difference between open source for the actual tooling and for the backends for the stuff versus open source instrumentation. So, you know, using open telemetry or something like that. Charity, any advice for people who are trying to decide between the vendor version of the thing and the open source version?
This is why we are all so delighted to welcome OTel, Open Telemetry, to the fold, which, you know, if you've instrumented your systems with OTel compatible stuff, you should never have to re-instrument them again, because all the major vendors and hopefully all the major open source providers out there will be compatible with it. And it will just be as simple as, you know, flipping a link. And this is good for everyone.
Yeah, I know, you know, I work for a vendor. I'm supposed to say, oh, the vendor thing is great, but it's such a sense of relief to go, okay, we instrumented once. We know that we can always use this rather than having to keep chasing the next thing. James, have you seen open telemetry change the conversation out there much?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, I think as an industry, you know, there's like swings and roundabouts, pendulums, you know, and we'll sort of be on a wave of like more open. I was going to say more open telemetry, but I mean that like open instrumentation, you know, and then we'll have like we'll have a wave of proprietary agents. And I think just certainly at the moment, customers are showing that they would like to see standardization of instrumentation. And yeah, I mean, that's having a significant impact on certainly vendor behaviors. And, you know, for those orgs that have, you know, had a good run these past, you know, 10 years or whatever it is with their proprietary agents, you know, they're having to respond to that. So yeah, I think the openness there is definitely something that customers see a value in and something that vendors are going to have to support. So yeah, absolutely. I think there's been a significant change. You don't want to be in the business of hey, check out our proprietary agents. They're going to make you effective. That's not the wave of technology that we're currently on. You want to be, here are these events. We're going to do an incredible job of understanding them and troubleshooting accordingly. It's focusing on, I guess, the data rather than the instrumentation.
We don't want to be competing on the basis of instrumentation. We want to be competing on the basis of value delivered to customers.
We're just about at time, and that seems like the perfect note to end on. So I want to just quickly wrap us up. First of all, I want to say a huge thank you to our panelists, to Joe and Charity and James for joining us, and then thank you to all of our attendees as well for dialing in and joining us live and for your great questions. I want to just quickly remind folks, if you're on this journey yourself, we have some great resources. So definitely get started with our free tier, open telemetry, auto instrumentation, and then as you're kind of going on that journey with your team, we've got workshops, we've got our Ollycon and Honeycomb talks, which of course are linked in the chat. And then, as you get further into that life cycle. You can start building observability into your processes, and we've got some great resources for that as well. So thanks again for joining us. And like I mentioned at the beginning, if you want to watch this webinar later, we'll send it out to you. And we've also got our other webinars available on demand as well. So thanks so much, folks. Have a good one.
Thanks.